livelihoods. Have the different youth-led schemes in Uganda been effective so far? That is our topic for today. I welcome you to Inter-University Debate, which is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I'm your moderator for the Inter-University Debate. My name is Fancy Jendalake. I'm an advocate and a tax consultant. With me, I have a panel of very, very powerful gentlemen and a lady. You're welcome to the Inter-University Debate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so just to be exact, these are familiar faces to Civic Space TV. So we are from different universities and they are going to unpack this topic today. To introduce this topic, now, Uganda grapples with a high level of unemployment, and this has even been made worse by the COVID-19. Now, Uganda is also grappling with post-COVID-19 problems among the youth, such as teenage pregnancy, still unemployment rate, issues of crimes. Now, during the COVID-19, we saw several businesses close and laid off workers, and this also affected young people who are working with some of these companies. Now, we are trying to build back after COVID-19. So we sit down with the young people in the universities and we discuss, looking at the different programs that the government has come up with. We look at their effectiveness, success stories, achievements, failures, weaknesses. How do we move forward when it comes to implementation of youth-led government schemes? Before we delve deep into that topic with my panel, let me introduce the panelists. I'll start with the gentleman on my extreme left, and that is Mr. Masawi Ivan. Ivan is a student at Kyambogo University. Ivan, you're welcome to the debate.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks to Civic Space TV, thanks to Center for Constitutional Governance. On behalf of Kyambogo, we are very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are happy to host you again. Our second panelist next to Ivan is Mr. Simon Luswata. Simon is a student at Makerere University Business School. Simon, you're welcome to the talk show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, our third panelist is Miss Joanitah Ngabirano. She's a student at Kampala International University. Joanitah, you're welcome to the debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Jenda. I'm happy to be here once again.
Okay, we are happy to have you. Our fourth panelist is Mr. Baluuku Derrick. He is a student at Makerere University. Derrick, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We are happy to have you for the inter-university debate. I know you've been on the youth roundtable before.
Sure.
So we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Ivan, let's kickstart this discussion of this topic. Now, as I stated, the topic is building livelihoods. Have the different youth schemes been effective so far?
Yes.
So let's kickstart by looking at the different schemes that the government has come up with, especially the ones that affect the youth. What are some of those schemes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Moderator. About youth, thanks for such a good topic because it expounds more about us as a generation of young people. Going back into history, last week, or not mistaken, this current week, government of Uganda was marking 25 years of UPE program and USE. This was back a program brought as a target to educating the youth and promoting literacy levels in the country so that the young people who would come out of such a program would be productive to the government. It was one from the education side, one of the programs that was put to enhance capacity, enhance skills and knowledge, which is a key in development. For any young country with a young population, education is priority and the basic of the priorities. But going back into the programs, as you've asked, the government has come up with a lot of programs in the past. I think the most outstanding was in 2013-14, the Youth Livelihood Fund, which was YLP. It was around 265 billion then. that was under Ministry of Gender Labour that was targeting the youth in terms of livelihood, skill development. But when we look at the outcome and the implementation of all the past government programs, they have been having a key issue with productivity because government has strategized more, has put more of its capacity on administrative costs. But any program should be targeted to an output. Unfortunately, you've limited to say that COVID came, but even before the coming of COVID, these schemes were performing poorly, basing on the standards of a program that is laid with a framework, with on a concept paper that is expected to produce fruits at the end of the day. That first, the key priorities to why the programs don't perform well is the education given to to the youth in our country. Quite often, even when you see the syllabuses, National Curriculum Development Centers now began adapting at annual level scale. They are not practical given the model, the hybrid model you'd want to implement when you're not implementing at a primary level. There is no way you can't study something at primary, find it at O level, then you finish it, then you don't find it at A level, and it carries sense. I think they should be streamlined. Is where these programs have lost focus. They are never streamlined with an agenda, with an output to bench on and say this is how the program has performed. Let's look at the statistics. How best have youth been engaged, economically been empowered? But even with these programs, I think you can't look at youth programs and shy away from the youth leadership. We can say that in the last years, government has expanded youth structures in terms of leadership and civic engagement. But how best have they been productive to represent the fellow youth when it comes to engagement and finding alternatives? So when we give a correct analysis of these programs on paper, they may look nice, but they are failed when it comes to implementation. They are failed when it comes to budgeting and planning. You look at even these new programs coming up. There is no way where if we can be 80% of the country and then we cry for inclusiveness. It doesn't make sense. It means if they are planning for us the majority. But where it has lost sense is that the productivity of the programs is not always given attention. Programs are put basing on political capital. Someone wants votes. Programs are brought basing on how to justify eating money or corruption, or justify creating more jobs for certain people as maybe a youth minister or what, but programs are not intentionally targeted to improving the status quo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ivan, for that. Ivan already started evaluating the youth programs, but we'll also get into that deep discussion. Let me move to Simon. So, Simon, government has continuously come up with several programs and projects for youth, and even when there's an open program for the entire country, we have seen youth being featured. And my question is, why has there been that focus?
Most of the programs that you've had just keep on changing names. But the concept and idea does not necessarily change. Why most of them focus on the youth is simply because they are the majority in the country and most vulnerable. When you're talking about the objectives of these projects, one, to get vocational skills for majorly the people that drop out of school, to get income generating activities for these people, and to provide capacity. So most of these things are the things that are needed by the youth. That's why even things or projects that are not supposed to be targeting a particular sector or group of people have ended up benefiting the youth majorly. You're working in a country that has the youth as the majority, and they are the most vulnerable. They are the ones that do not have income, they are jobless, and they lack the skills. Recognize that even the capacity of our education system to create people that can produce, that can operate and have their own jobs is very minimal. Most of them drop out, others do not have access, and the education sector has also become very expensive. So these people end up being needy and lack money. They do not have jobs. They are the majority and end up being so vulnerable to need these particular concepts. But realize, most of the things that happen eventually fail because of some few problems that we shall talk about later in the show. But the reason they target the youth is majorly because they are the majority, and then they are very vulnerable because of the circumstances that have been created. And I'll say this most of the times in this show, that the reason these things have failed is the same reason that we need them, because they are created to address a problem that has been created by the status quo. And that same problem keeps on haunting them even when you create the opportunities and the projects. That's why they keep on changing names, but the concept is the same. Give people money to start up businesses. These people have not gone to school. These people lack the capacity, they lack the vocational skills. And even if you grapple with it, at the end of the day, it goes back to the education sector where they reign and were not able to benefit. So it's a concept that creates a cycle of the same, but then it just keeps changing names.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Let me move to Joanitah. So let's talk about the government model of implementation of the youth schemes. You find that in most cases, money is being provided from the government to the youth. And in most scenarios, when you look at especially the youth livelihood program, the youth are expected to form groups. Money is pumped into the hands of the groups, and then they are expected to implement and pay back. So what is your perspective on the government model of giving finances to the youth and implementation in that way?
Thank you, Gender, for that question. The implementation and the model at which the government is putting all this into place wouldn't be bad, giving the youth the money. But I want to first appreciate the statement of Luswata saying that these all projects are one thing. They keep giving them the same name again and again, but at the end of the day, it's the youth, developing the youth, and that's it. So what is happening in these youth projects is that the government sends in money, and at the end of the day, these youth are not guided. For example, when the money comes from the government, it's planned for appreciating them that they have planned and they want the youth to develop, to improve the quality of the youth's lives. These youths are not trained. They don't know themselves what they want. You can't just give a dropout, someone who has dropped out from school, is having issues, maybe was impregnated, a girl was impregnated and that's why she dropped out of school, and the solution you're bringing to this girl is to give her money. The first thing she wants to buy are diapers for her child, or to buy bread, or to buy the nice shoe. She doesn't know that it is important to start a good project that will raise money to develop her life for a time that is for more than maybe 10 years or plus. So what they do, they don't train these youths and they end up getting nothing out of this. That's one of the problems. Another thing, it's the way the money is being sent into these people. For example, it's the problem of corruption. We've talked about it again and again, but it's the reason as to why a lot of things are not happening. Sometimes it's hard to ask whether we who talk about corruption, we ourselves are corrupt, because you can't tell where there is a clean system in this country. Everyone is corrupt. Everything is corrupt. People are bragging about being corrupt. They confidently say to everybody that, come on, me, I was, the money found me here, this found me here. I didn't ask for it, So it's, the whole system is rotten, that we should maybe wipe out everything and start afresh, because you can't tell whether at the district level somebody will be able to do their job right. Because even if the money was planned for well, it won't reach the youth the way it is supposed to. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Joanitah. Let me move to Derrick. Derrick, I saw you agreeing with a lot of the panelists, nodding your head when they were speaking. So let's evaluate these different programs. Let's look at these programs and evaluate them. Now, my question is, to what extent have these programs lived to the objectives? We have listened to the different objectives that Simon brought on board. To what extent have they lived to the objectives for bringing them on board?
Okay, sure. Thank you so much, Miss Gender. So, in the very first place, why these programs were brought on board to, first of all, to tackle youth unemployment, because you realize the youths, as all of them have mentioned, the youths form the largest percentage here in the country. And there is something called the demographic dividend. You realize it's the youths who have the energy to work, and contribute largely to the GDP. Yet these youths are underemployed, or most of them are even unemployed. So I think the government and other policymakers have continuously brought these programs to solve the issue of unemployment. So we will evaluate these programs against such a measure. First of all, for these programs that have been brought, you realize it's about access to capital, access to credit, giving these youths money, right? For let's say the Youth Livelihood Fund, it's to give youths money. It's about financial inclusion. And that in particular will lead to, let's say, expansion of businesses for the youths, right? They will say start businesses, but then how sustainable are those businesses started by those youths, right? So that's something which is very, very critical for me, because you could those youths could be given money, they could start businesses, but then how are those businesses going to be sustainable? And that goes back to what most of these people have talked about, the issues of skilling, right? Because skilling, and then there are also other issues about mentorship, coaching, because you will give people money, you'll ease the access to money, but then these people won't know how to manage that money. So that goes back to things like financial literacy, teaching people about financial literacy, the youths, then bringing on board things like mentorship programs, then coaching for the youth, and then skilling, teaching them things like entrepreneurship, innovation, and how they are going to use that money. So for me, to evaluate these programs, I would say they have to a lesser extent, achieved the goals, because you realize the unemployment rates have actually not reduced. They've kept on skyrocketing despite the interventions and everything that has been going on. So yeah, basically what needs to be done is to maybe benchmark with other countries to see how they are implementing their programs, the youth programs, because youths are very critical in the development of any country. They are energetic, they compose, they are the largest composition. So it's very critical to look at how you're going to develop these people so that they can contribute to the GDP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Derrick. Let me get back to Ivan. Ivan, I know you had earlier on started on evaluating these programs and their reasons for failure and so forth. But let me start from this point. Are there some achievements out of these programs? Because some of them are already closed and done with. They have been implemented. Are there any achievements out of these programs from the objectives that Derrick and Simon brought on board?
Part of the programs that was implemented by the NRM government on education was UPE and USE. I can say I'm a product of both. So I can't deny that there are no achievements because I passed through a UPE section and a USE section at some point. So their achievements is why I told you they need to be evaluated at the productivity levels vis-a-vis government's interest is always to have administrative, have workers and what, but when it doesn't look at the outcome of the program. These programs majorly, their targets are always the ones not justified, the targets of the programs or the intentions that a program will be brought up. Let's say Youth Livelihood Fund, which was brought up in 2014 with a budget. They have told us they have benchmarked from countries around Africa. But later, when the program is to be implemented, it faces financial challenges, it faces corruption, there's goodwill from government is always less. So where I get problem with government in managing youth programs and the whole youth is that government thinks it can create a way. To me, I feel it would be better if government always focused on creating an environment vis-a-vis programs, because programs will never solve, our numbers can't be solved by simple programs. Our numbers can be solved by an environment. That as long as you create more programs, but when the cost of living, the cost of education, because young people are not pro diseases that they are going to be in hospital sick. These are people who are alive, there was a good health record. But as long as the cost of an environment where a young person is to survive is high, even these programs you will bring up, they will look at them in terms of consumption. I will enter a parish development model to get money to go and buy land, eat. I will not enter with an intention of getting skill development, of getting money to reinvest in an SME and grow so that I be a revenue candidate to pay tax and what. The real intentions of government will be lost because the environment within which the youth are already operating doesn't favor a program, but they first need an environment. That a program targets to skill someone in an environment where someone knows the value of the skill is going to be used to create economic empowerment, to create identity in terms of capacity. But if you're targeting programs to already people in an environment where they can't afford, programs will be turned from the production to consumption. I'll use the government money to improve my welfare because I cannot die of hunger, I cannot die of bills, I can't because I'm busy chasing of a program. These people in the programs need an environment that when a program comes, it is given that attention that is a program because it has been brought into an environment that needs a program. But once the environment remains the way it is, most of these programs are meant to struggle because an environment is built by the education sector of a certain country. It is built by the responsibility, even from parents. We should not shy away. That parents most have lost morals, they have lost responsibility towards also doing their role because this is an African setting where youths and young people are nurtured that at a certain age you will be involved in this, at a certain age you will be involved in this. But we have all lost that. First things first would be to build an environment through the education, through the frameworks, even the leadership structures themselves, that once these programs are to come, they come to an environment where they are to survive. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ivan. Simon, we are still evaluating this program. And earlier on, you gave us objectives, reasons why these programs were brought on board, plus why the youth are the target group. Now, my question to you builds from that, and the same that I asked Derrick. To what extent has these programs lived to those objectives?
I think they've failed on a larger extent, and it's for a reason. For example, you do not tell me that you're going to skill a population by giving them money to start businesses. Because even if you want to say a group can come together to start up a business, they do not have the technical know-how or expertise to run that particular business. So if I dropped out of school and you give me money to start an idea, or even if you give me an idea, I do not have the technical know-how. Fundamentally, even in their objectives, they talk about skilling and vocational skilling, but they do not show us how they are going to skill the youth. Because even if you're just giving them the idea, the technical know-how is very important for these businesses to thrive. Secondly, the environment where these businesses are operating is not favorable for them. That even if these people are successful and they can come up with a venture, how profitable is that venture for this business to be sustained? Recognize that even the loans and the credit they take, they're supposed to give back interests. Why some of these projects have failed is that at a point they think they're not going to give interest because they give them a grace period. That if you're able to return the money within a year, you're not going to give interest. And there will be optimism that I'm not going to pay interest. But then when you go to the environment, you recognize that a year is very small, you cannot operate, it's not even profitable for you to return the money, to get profits, return the money and not pay interest at all. So the cash flows that happen when you start operating the business, then try to show you that it's not profitable enough, and that's why they end up failing. Secondly, the environment. For example, if you have to start up a business, the profitability and the circumstances that are formed by government, the taxes are associated with the things that they're going to use, accessibility to raw materials, the infrastructure where these people are operating, because recognize they have to move, the charges that are involved with exchange of money and those sorts of things are very bad. The physical indiscipline in this country is very bad, and it affects all businesses. So what you have to start with fixing is the environment where the businesses are operating, not you creating businesses only to die another day because of the same environment. The problem that can fix what is happening with the youth is skilling them, not necessarily giving them money. Create an environment where everybody can thrive with minimal capital, and not just giving them loads and loads of money simply because you think the problem is them having capital. No, it's not. One can think it's the simplest idea to get that if you give them money, everything is going to be okay. And secondly, the politics that is involved in these projects have been a detriment to them. Recognize you have to be NRM to benefit from some of them, at least, even if it's just a perception. If you have that perception, whether it's perceived or real, it's going to affect the people that are going to go for that project, because now you have to have the yellow card for you to stand a chance at getting those things. You get it? That perception that people have about it. And secondly, if somebody is a staunch NRM and the people know him, he cannot miss out on such a policy, even when they do not need it. So it ends up benefiting only a handful of people and leaves out majorly the people, because even the youth are not necessarily NRM. Some of them do not agree with them, and they're using it as a political card to get their votes. That's why fundamentally these things keep on changing names, because they're going to tell you that we did the other one in the other election, we're bringing a new one, and it's to benefit you. That's the other thing, and it's becoming a problem. So why some of these things change names? For example, the National Youth Policy had its major objective to do with agriculture. With a change in priorities, the Youth Livelihood Program now focuses more on industries, because now the government position on whether they should focus on agriculture has changed. They now want to focus on industries. So we are there. They do not have a good position. But listen, our strength is with the agriculture, and most of the things that are happening are subsistence farming. Even if you want to say that the National Youth Policy did not thrive well or did not perform, recognize that the agriculture sector is not profitable enough. We've seen it. Ukraine produces the highest number of food that goes to the world market, and they're getting money. We've seen how it can affect everybody when those people are not producing food. But President Museveni tells us that, you see, you do not necessarily get money from these things, and therefore we should move to the industries. If we had focused there and people can grow crops, not just for subsistence farming, but on a large scale, on a commercial scale, we would have earned money. Now, where is the problem? Is it with the project or is it with the government priorities? You can clearly see it, that we do not focus on one thing and think, here is how we can get things. Because if we are able to produce enough food, and you'll be surprised to know that we even import matoke from Kenya. But government somehow thinks we do not need agriculture. And that's where the problem is. The priorities and the environment do not necessarily favor the projects and the business that these people are starting.
Okay. Thank you so much, Simon. That was quite a powerful submission. Every time we are discussing about the projects, the youth projects, apart from USE and UPE, sometimes I sit and ask how many people have benefited from some of these programs. Like right now on the panel, how many people have benefited from either Youth Livelihood Fund, Youth Venture Capital
We are
Fund?
not NRM.
Ivan says we are not NRM. Okay, so anyway, those are some of the issues that have come up. Let me move to Joanitah. We have listened to their perspective. Now, what is your perspective? To what extent have these programs lived to the objectives of bringing them on board?
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, it's a sad story Simon brings of we having to import matoke, and then we go on social media to other countries telling them that we are a very good agriculture country, because how can we be benefiting from agriculture, because that's where we benefit most, and then we have to import agriculture products from other countries? That's very sad. The planning of this country, as far as these youth programs are concerned, is one shoe fits everyone. This government thinks that the problems that the youth of Karamoja are facing are the same problems that the youth in central Uganda are facing. But that's not the thing. You can't plan for a Karamoja boy of 23 who is still in primary at 23. You plan the same way for somebody who is in Kampala in a good secondary school, looking at them as the same. Because what I've realized in this country, the people who are well off are the same people who are benefiting from these projects. Yes, the projects are there, and they are having connections. The Gambanogu project, it's also a project. It's the person, that brings the project to the people who have already developed. So the poor are becoming more poor, the rich are becoming richer. So the projects are working, but they are not working for the people they are supposed to work for. So at the end of the day, they are not working. Because if they were working, we would appreciate and say that the youth in this country have seen some help, because like the parish model, it didn't help. It wasn't specifically to help the old. Using the example that the youth are the biggest number in the country, not only in Uganda, in Africa at large. The age of 18 to 30 specifically is the biggest number. So when you look at the parish model, it wasn't meant for the old or those who are so young. It was meant for us. But at the end of the day, it didn't help. You just you watch news, and all you see is that nobody benefited. Like I said earlier in my conversation, these people are not skilled. You're not training somebody to gain from the project you've started. They don't know why you're bringing this project to them. They know that that's why people on social media, they keep saying government here to Yambe. They're not asking to be trained to be better. If you look at all the people who are having these problems of unemployment, living low lives, those who are engaging in low productive activities, they're asking government here to Yambe to give them money, because that's what they are used to. They give them money, they buy a chapati today, and then tomorrow there is nothing to do. They are not helping them at all. So what is supposed to be done by the country is to improve the way they are planning for the youth. It is typically absurd that we go out there and some people appreciate, by the way, I don't even know who appreciates these projects, because like you said, I wonder if anybody has benefited from those projects, but it's not because that there is nobody who doesn't need this project. Something else that I would want to bring on board is the fact that I wonder, there is this MTN project that was circulating, I think it was last year, if you saw it on social media. They were training different youth who have already started something. They train them to win a certain specific amount of money. But then these youth had already started something. I wonder why such projects which are not started by the government are always successful, because I've seen several of them that are not government projects that have been funded direct from Western countries. These projects become successful and people benefit from them. They will start sowing, and then these are the same projects that the country will use as an example that we've started sowing projects. The youth have started sowing. The youth have started making pots and stuff and that. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be the solving of problems that a person from Karamoja should be helped the same way the person in Kampala is being helped, because they're not facing the same problems.
Okay, thank you so much,
I think
Joanitah.
one
Yes,
good
Simon.
thing from her speech is when she talked about us being endowed differently. For example, a youth in Karamoja would appreciate very much if you helped him graze his cows and get money out of them. It's not the same with a person from the central
Different
region
priorities.
who would
So the
appreciate
issue is
having
government making program that they think the entire youth in the
We don't
country should
streamline
fit.
regional priorities, which is a big challenge.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
need to streamline according to the environment of where the target person you're aiming is. How can that person succeed in that particular environment?
Okay, thank you. Let me move to Derrick. So, Derrick, we have listened to all the panelists point out problems with these projects. My question is, why do you think government insists on bringing these projects? Because we have not seen much change from the projects. Like the panelists have said, you find there's a change of name. I don't think there is anything much different from the Youth Capital Venture Fund, from the Youth Livelihood Fund. There is always similar things, the same things, changing names, but the programs. Why do you think government keeps on insisting on providing the youth with these programs?
Okay, sure. Thank you. So, first of all, I don't know the government's motive, but then I'll give you one thing that I met when I went to northern Uganda, which is on ground. What the people say there. So it was a refresher training that we're conducting for youth leaders in northern Uganda, particularly Arua, right? So when we went there, we were teaching the youths about the parish development model, also asking them about how they're accessing it and how it has benefited them. So one of them told us what he thinks generally about the government programs and the parish development model in general. So he told us that for him, he thinks that these government programs are a reward for them, for how the people there vote for the government, right? So for them, it's a political tool. And another one was saying that most of these programs actually come when it is time for elections, that maybe the government gives them those programs in exchange for their votes. So that is one thing that the youths, and you might agree with me, even here in the central region, some think, okay, when you bring that money, they will say that, yeah, okay, it could be also in eastern Uganda, because we are voting for this government, yeah, fair enough, they should give us that. that money, without even understanding, the process, the intricacies, and what that money is meant for. Then the other issue that also came out clearly from my field visit to northern Uganda is the issue of the information, right? The access to information. Because you'll bear with me, because when we were asking the youth leaders, they told us people at the grassroots, they don't even know about those programs. They have never had. The other time I was conducting a Twitter space, to talk about the PDM in the Karamoja region. And there is this girl, an activist from northern Uganda. She's called Masawi Ivan. She's from Makerere. So she told me most of the youths there don't even know about the parish development model. Like, there is literally very little information, even about the access itself. Very few people even know about those programs. So you'll find that very few people benefit, and yet these are the same programs that are, that are brought back to the people. So that's really a challenge. Yes, the issue of the access to information. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Derrick. Let me get back to Ivan. Now, Ivan, we have pointed out several challenges with these programs. My question is on the presence of youth leaders. We have got youth leaders at every platform. We have them in parliament, district level, parish level, village level. Why haven't we seen an improvement on these programs, even with the presence of youth leaders themselves?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Yenda. We all appreciate the fact that we have a National Youth Council in place. Besides the National Youth Council, we even have leaders who are not in the National Youth Council, but majority of our leaders now, the age is turning to come down because of many of the young population and very many getting interested in participating in governance. But in Uganda, from past years, there has been an increase in youth joining more space of the civic engagement and such spaces. Youth, with even such programs like the one we are on, to build capacity for more youth to enter into such spaces of leadership. But when we look at how our numbers as youth, having a National Youth Council in place, having youth structures going down up to village level, we look at the intention of the structures. Was it political, or it was based on having productivity, or having a target, or having there was an agenda, a clear defined agenda for why we have a National Youth Council in place. I'm a member of the National Youth Council, so I can't shy away.
So we should be holding Ivan sort of
No,
accountable.
yeah, I can't shy away. I'm a member.
Mm.
But when we look that this is a structure that is in place, I think as a statute of decoration that as Uganda we have advanced in our leadership, that even the youth, because when we look at countries like Kenya and TZ have not been having a National Youth Council. So they are vis-a-vis there for decoration and what, but when you look at you having a National Youth Council in place that has no budget, it only has a budget for sitting allowance. That per year it is given 1 billion shillings just to conduct those are around 5,000 youth at lower levels and the executive of 11. Most of the expenditure on this youth council is not targeted towards using them to retool or using this youth to mobilize, using this youth to engage their fellow youth into programs, or to build even the capacity of leaders themselves. I can give you that most of the youth leaders themselves don't even have capacity to survive financially. How will they empower a fellow youth?
That's
But all
interesting.
this, you reduce it to where I took this perspective. The environment government has created. That the environment itself, that if you have a national youth council in place without a budget, without a clearly defined program, why it is there, apart from the fact that you justify politically that we have leadership systems where we shall pull up some leaders to come up, and if they match with us, they will be part of us. If they don't match with us, they will suffer locally, and sportly we have them there in the system. But there was, when you even read that the objectives for formulation of the National Youth Council, the objectives were so good, but on ground, government lost interest in the priorities. First, from the funding. Second, from planning. That government in its plans doesn't put these councils even priority in implementation and supervision of these programs. They are there just after political season, you will hear about them in the next election.
Why are you still part of the youth council?
I think that's a question we are going to have Ivan respond to
Anyone,
after
yeah.
the break. I'm also dying to get that answer. So let's take a short break and we'll come back with that discussion with the panel that we have right here. See you after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that break. We are still with students of different universities and we are evaluating the youth schemes that government has come up with. We are looking at to what extent have they achieved the objectives and how best can we help the youth, especially on issues of unemployment and the objectives of those different programs. So before we took a short break, we were still with Ivan and a question was posed by Simon. So I'll give Ivan a chance to respond to that, plus also to complete the discussion that we have.
Basically, why the National Youth Council is struggling is that most of these programs are not decentralized enough in terms of supervision and implementation to even involve the youth structures themselves. You cannot have ministers who are elderly in their late 80s be in charge of programs of the youth. But one way where youth engagement can be improved in supervision of this, because a vulnerable young leader can't do much, to do very much for his electorate. Reason, he has not been given capacity by the state to do function better. But one way that I propose that some of these programs in terms of administration should be decentralized as well as possible, to see that the National Youth Council is a supervisor, is a key stakeholder in implementing some of these programs.
But Ivan, let me just ask something at that very point. Now, who is supposed to cause that change? Because we, as the youth, we are put in a situation where we are complaining about, and our complaint is valid to some extent. These projects, we need a change with these projects. And then we also have national youth leaders. Yeah, we need a change with those projects. Now, we are left in a dilemma. Who is supposed to cause that change, even in the presence of youth leaders who also feel disgruntled? So who should help cause that change among those programs?
I think as youth, we have not done much in demanding for our spaces, in demanding for a cause. Even when you look at the design of most of these programs, the reason they are not productive, the reasons they don't target us, there has been very low involvement of ourselves demanding to be involved more, and of also the other parties involving the youth more. Is why the success of these programs has always not been that much. I think it calls upon even when you're not a leader, but any younger Ugandan, to have much more interest in demanding more accountability from such programs, to have much more interest in demanding inclusiveness. Inclusiveness, when you're the majority and you feel neglected, it is such traumatizing. When you're the majority but your affairs are always not given first priority, that when you come to a budgeting process, then you find certain issues given priority over the livelihood of the youngest member of the composition of the set, the young people not being. So it all comes back to us as the young people, the leaders, those emerging leaders, to demand more from the system, because we all know the kind of country we are in, that power has been limited to some few individuals, that programs will come up on paper, but inclusiveness is still very low. We should accept that as long as inclusiveness is still low, even these national youth councils and likes youth councillors at district levels will not do much, because the first question to solve in terms of supervision and administration of these programs is for people to feel included. From the basic of consultation to implementation is where the programs will thrive.
Okay, just one more question before I move to Simon, because this is a bit interesting. So, Ivan, do you think we should also, to some extent, hold the youth leaders accountable? Because we have carefully watched a lot of things happen with the youth leaders. We have seen scenarios where the youth leaders, instead of fighting for what projects should benefit the youth, they are fighting over who should be a youth leader. We have seen protests around in front of State House. We have seen youth leaders fight over who should be a leader, who should lead us. I won in elections, you shouldn't be the one leading, you shouldn't be, instead of a fight over what projects should benefit the youth, how can we consult and involve the youth? So to some extent, do you think we should also hold some of these youth leaders accountable?
It is not even holding them accountable. My brother here can agree with me that the environment they have created, especially this regime, it has created an environment of survival and vulnerability, that they want to use leadership to get people more vulnerable. But what is the essence of the leadership? Leadership should exist for the purpose. That why should you, because in the end, if I'm the national, I'm sorry to Jacob, I know he's a good follower of this program, but if I'm the chairperson of the National Youth Council, and the only things I get is to go to State House, have escort the minister and have tea with the president, but I don't rise up to get accountability from him, how affairs of the people I represent, then there is no purpose, the essence of why the leadership. Because on paper it is really very smart. On paper, the framers of the policy, framers of the whole structure put a lot of efforts in putting out something that other countries have had to benchmark and adopt. But when it comes to implementation, that there is why I call that, even when we discuss a lot about these programs, the key essence that we demand from NRM government is the goodwill. Less programs be brought in goodwill. Have leadership in place with goodwill. Have target programs. Have an education of USA and UPE with goodwill. Not a class to develop an anthill, then you react. Be there with goodwill 24/7, that you care about the environment that these programs have to thrive. You care about this leadership. that you put it there to help you, not you put it there to justify that, yeah, when donors come, we shall justify that even the biggest majority of our young people are into civic space. So we justify for funding, we justify for resources. Let this leadership be on purpose. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Derrick.
I just want to say something very small.
Yes, please.
So when we went to northern Uganda for a field visit, we asked the youth leaders what they think majorly impedes successful implementation of those programs. So one of the things that they mentioned, because you will know that, for example, on the PDM, there's what we call a parish development committee. Yeah, and that's tasked with the implementation of the PDM. And on that parish development committee, there is a representative of the youth, a youth leader, particularly someone who is going to represent the youths. So when we asked those people, one of the challenges they said that they are poorly facilitated, because you realize for something like the information on, let's say the PDM, because you will remember that there were changing guidelines for the PDM. Every time guidelines were changing, and people were not in the know of the guidelines that were changing. So you realize that it is the youth leaders who have to take this information down to the grassroots. For example, through, let's say, radio talk shows. But when we asked these youth leaders, they were saying that we are not facilitated. You know, we are not, let's say, given money even for our, usual meetings, right? We are not given transport, to go down to tell people about, let's say, the parish development model. Even radio airtime, we don't get that. So I think there are inherent challenges, that impede these leaders. The policy is good. They are good programs, but then the implementation itself is
Okay.
a problem. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Derrick. Now, something else, Derrick. My issue also is that why haven't the youth leaders fought better for better funding? Some of those things that they, like you said, the problems are inherent. You find the previous youth leaders faced the same problem. The ones coming are facing the same problems of projects being headed by the elders who are in the evenings of their lives, heading youth programs. You find they have issues of funding. You find they have all these issues. Why is it that the youth have accepted to inherit problems that are impeding the implementation of their programs? That is my issue. I don't know if anybody can probably respond to that. Yes, Joanitah.
I would like to respond to that question in this line. Ivan mentioned of youth, the National Youth Council being just a picture to tell people that we are having youth leaders, but in actual sense they are not there.
Why have they accepted to be a picture? It's my issue.
Yeah,
Because these youth that are in those
They have an
places
option.
themselves, this is my perspective.
Yes,
Don't
please.
be hurt, my leaders. Themselves
Yes.
I feel like themselves have become part of the system, and they're not doing what they're exactly supposed to do. When they're advocating for the rights and whatever for the other youth who are not able to reach these spaces, all we see is them complain on social media, on TVs, but in actual sense, they are not doing what, as long as they get their car allowance. That's what is being done, because you can't bring out a project, you can't show me any project, and you say that the National Youth Council has been able to help the youth in Karamoja in this line. This is what they have helped the youth in Karamoja to, So themselves have become part of the system. I feel like it's no longer for the youth, it's for
there.
It's
I
me.
become part of the system.
Yes.
It's now me and my stomach.
It's like how we were, there was a time we were looking at how how the women have been helped, the women rights. But in actual sense, you will appreciate that it's only 3 women who have come in the system, and now they are okay. They have forgotten where they came from, and they are not remembering that this whole thing started to help all the women. So now that they're at the top, it's them and nothing else.
Let us not sugarcoat things. There is a deficiency of principles in this country. A big one. I told people, I was in my year 1, I was close to people that were part of the guild in my school. And I saw how vulnerable they were. They did not have power. And I told people, I'm going to be around these circles, but I'm not going to belong to the guild because they do not have the power for me to change the things that happen around this school. We cannot do anything. I get angry when these people come here and fail to defend the positions of the organs they belong to. You know why? Because when they start to complain like us, then we cannot hold them accountable. They will blame everybody around them except for themselves. These people continuously belong to these feel-good positions. They get their allowances and keep quiet because you cannot continuously belong to an organ you know is not helping your people and then come and tell us, we have to be here. When Liz Truss was resigning from her position, she said, I cannot fulfill my mandate, the mandate that I asked for from the people. So on principle, I'm resigning simply because I cannot do it. So if you're failing to achieve the things that you're supposed to achieve, then why do you continuously belong to the things that are used to justify the impunity put on the youth in this particular country? So I want to talk to them. Please stop belonging to things that are used to justify the impunity in this country. Because right now they will tell you, the youth leaders are not doing anything. We cannot hold anybody accountable because you're also telling us and complaining like us. So who are you going to blame?
Yes. Thank you. I can see Ivan wants to respond, and as well as Derrick. Let's start with Ivan. Because Ivan, Simon was speaking to you and the youth leaders out there.
Yes.
We hope the heroes are watching,
That
and
is
all the youth MPs.
Yeah, that is my request, that let Simon's voice be extended to them and they take it in good faith.
And our host for the youth roundtable.
I'm always there. I've been there over
Yes,
5
so we
years.
hope our host for the youth roundtable is also watching. Yes.
Kidega is a strong member of these panels, so hope he gets the message, Honorable Better. Yeah, but the key thing is that advocacy and accountability, I accept. I've followed the National Youth Council history from 2011 to date. It has been lacking. Most of the environment that, since in Uganda you have 50,000 graduates struggling for around 9,000 jobs, people sometimes take these positions as employment because they lack where to go. The state, since most are vulnerable in the spaces, the environment they have to implement the leadership in, is why he clearly justified it that to benefit you should be NRM. If you're non-NRM, you end coming around and being a leader, but to a population that we only know, we went with you because we never wanted to have said that we could accept an NRM to lead us. So, but we need to call the government to goodwill, that let's stop setting an education system in place when the goodwill is not to give it models, to give it upgrade, to invest in it highly with technology, with skills and a mindset that can be productive to the country in the coming years. Let's stop putting up projects, even these youth skilling projects. Let's be honest. Let's not do it maybe that because you want to impress the accountability from the leadership of the youth or because it is demanding. But I expect people in the current government to be parental in their thinking. That where will their children survive if these others who are not surviving are on the street? Theirs who will be insecure automatically. There is no way you will be rich in an environment where others were unemployed, were poorly educated, are street kids, and you'll be safe. They are creating insecurity for theirs. They think they can thrive in international schools and an environment here. So basically, I want to say that the whole of the leadership structure in Uganda is struggling because Why would we be 80% and we even just discuss at a national youth council level? We would discuss even at a parliamentary scale that we have more young people in offices. But even if in parliament they don't constitute 35, at least they are now coming to 40. But if they don't constitute 60% in a where they are 80% in population, it still shows there is a gap. And we can't accuse those who are there that they are there to justify. Although it may be fact like he has stated, but it all calls to calling for accountability. Whether if we deserve a change in the whole of the leadership, or we deserve more to add more in terms of the ways we are using for advocacy for more.
And then the other thing, I think
Simon, then we have Derrick. No, you can complete.
I think we are not being honest with ourselves. This narrative is out there that you see we are the majority, so we are supposed to be the majority even in the leadership positions. There is nothing wrong with a country of young people being headed by a person who is 85. For as long as you have power in your vote and in your voice, and even from the outside you can influence policies that are implemented, then there is nothing wrong with those people being in those positions. But continuously voting for the same people and then come and complain, or continuously voting for the same people that do not represent your views and then complain that we are not necessarily there because these people are there, but you're the ones voting for them. The youth are 80%. Then how do we get those people in those positions? And if you do not stand, then it's your problem. And if you vote for them, then why are you complaining about them being in those positions? The double standards are the problem with the youth today because people don't want to take responsibility.
So Simon, in other words, even the youth themselves who are not in leadership positions are supposed to be held accountable for some of these
Exactly,
things.
because they do not register to vote. They do not show up. I was seeing the lines in Kenya in their election, and most of the people were old people. These people only come for vibe in rallies and do not necessarily show up on election day. They will go on Twitter, do those things, shout about everything. They do not vote and then complain about leaders. You lose the right to complain when you do not vote. So you cannot continuously tell us that you're the majority, but those people are in those positions anyway. How do they get there?
Okay, let's have Derrick.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there are inherent factors that lead to the perceived incompetence of, let's say, youth leaders. As I mentioned earlier on, you know, I am so familiar with the parish development model. For this particular model, there are challenges specifically with this model. For example, the delayed release of funds, right? So you will you will say that the youth leaders are not doing their part, but then are they facilitated really? Because here we are, but then you will see the guidelines, let's say to the programs, changing day in and day out. And then when you reach, let's say, to the release of the funds, you know, the funds are not released on time. So it leaves little space for the youth leaders or the people who, the leaders who are going to implement this program. So the whole issue starts with the policy makers, the ones that make the policies, you know, changing the guidelines all the time, delaying the release of funds. So the youth leaders are left with really very little to do. I'll give you another example. There are blanket cuts that were made in the budget framework paper. I don't know if you noticed the 70% cuts, the budget cuts that were made, for example, on the women empowerment programs and most social programs. So those budget cuts implied that there only remained money for salary to pay
administration.
Yeah, money for administration. So that meant that there was not going to be money, let's say, to implement, you know, the activities. So these are inherent policy issues, and this leaves very little, you know, to blame the youth leaders. I get they have a responsibility to do.
To account.
Advocate for better.
Yes, and really,
Advocate for
really
better. You see,
they
that
do
is-
advocacy.
You see, that
because-
is my problem. My issue is the youth leaders. We see them at speeches, giving speeches before the president. We see them fighting over who should be a youth leader.
right.
Now, we see them having their different meetings, sittings, and so forth. We see them complaining about how they are constrained. Now, my issue is
Advocacy.
the inherent problems that the youth leaders keep getting. Why haven't they? You see,
You
like
want them to
National
pull
Youth
out of the system?
No. Like National Youth Council, there's a 5-year term, right? In 5 years, you sit in office, and then you know that your predecessor is going to inherit a constrained budget. Why haven't you advocated for a better budget? That is my issue.
Advocacy really goes on. Even I belong also to the civil society. We do really advocacy. We advocate for these things, to be implemented and to be done. But then it all goes back to the policy makers, right? You realize
So your
these
issue
people
is
don't
advocacy is ongoing, but the policy
Definitely.
makers have refused to change the system.
definitely
Yeah.
advocacy goes on, but policymakers, you realize they have to do a lot to streamline whatever they do. Issues with their monitoring and evaluation systems, because here is the thing: the policymakers have not even learned any lessons from the previous implementation of
Who are the policy makers?
ministries, government. Those are the ones that draw up those programs, that delayed funding, everything goes back to them.
I think
Allow me.
Yes, Joanitah, then Ivan.
I think the problem of the youth being the problem started from here. I remember you asking me, and I think there is something that Derrick didn't get, that we were trying. I think the two of them, since they are part of the whole system, there, Ivan and
oppressors.
Ivan and
Even you,
Derrick. There
I
is where they are
remember.
not get. Yes, I'm also a leader, but in other means. So what we were trying to say, the same thing that Simon said, is that these leaders have become part of the system. The leaders, the ones who are advocating for these things.
Ivan
So-
said they go and take tea in State House.
Exactly, and he's part of it. If he says it, if he's part of the National Youth Council and he says it, that means he means it. So they have become part of the system, that even when they're advocating, there is a level they stop
don't want
at.
to annoy the system.
Exactly, because we have all agreed that this money, whether it has come at 10%, it will reach the village, it will reach the district level, right? And if it has reached the district level, why isn't it working? That list, how much have you done to use that 10%? Because if you're saying that it's the implementation of these projects that is failing, the list they have done, how much are you, the youth who are being and who are still down there, how are you helping these people down with that 10% that is being given to you by the government? That means they first pay themselves the allowance. If it comes 100%, they'll give themselves more. If it comes 10%, they'll still give themselves what they're supposed to get, and then they cater for the other ones last.
So Ivan, within your constrained budget, why haven't you been able to do something within that budget? Literally, if I get from Joanitah's issue, there is limited funding, there is small money, but why is it that we have administrative costs and sitting allowance at a priority?
And as Simon said, if the
that's the money
system
that
is
has
not
come,
working, why are they still part of it as the leaders for that National Youth Council?
The allowances. By the way, take those allowances out and nobody will be. We won't be members.
Why does
I think
why does Bobi Wine almost even continue to stand? Why does Bobi Wine continue to stand even when he knows?
I think that doesn't apply here.
No,
Let me first appreciate senior here, Luswata, for objecting something very honest. Power. even us here, as long as you don't have power, you will be used to justify. Even in the inter-youth party dialogue, we always have, I represent an opposition party, unfortunately. These are the very debates we have had. Why do we continue to be there as members? As a design, as a framework that it exists, yet as someone is using it to justify elsewhere. That there is development when it comes to the democratic levels, democracy levels, civic engagement, all that. There is a ministry with a minister, minister and permanent secretary and
First word was true.
yes, sorry, and the budget.
No, it's okay.
But when the essence, sorry about that, the essence is only administrative cost. Yes.
You see the people behind the cameras laughing.
The whole essence is an administrative cost. There is no money put aside for production and engagement. Honestly, then it justifies that we don't have the power as the young people. I think as leaders, we need to mobilize ourselves more and mobilize our colleagues. That how best do we get power? He stated it very well how power is got. I hope too I was in leadership and that such space. Whenever you in campaigns, you will seem very powerful. But after winning, you really know that is when you understand you don't have the power. You remain in your office or your room alone, and is when you discover you don't have the power.
Well, I listen to them making promises in their campaigns, and they remind me of those primary campaigns. If you vote me into power, I will make sure there is sugar in the porridge. Like, you cannot do those things.
So the key issue is power. We need to be empowered to have the power to get this accountability, to have the power to demand more. Even when we try to come out and say we are advocating, but I can even question to Honorable Jacob here, the chairperson, that the power needs to be felt by the people he represents, not him being in an office that justifies he's a member of the IGAD, other youth platforms around the globe. That doesn't justify why leadership is. It should be the purpose. It should be felt by the structure itself that our leadership is here. We have seen countries like Nigeria, even with their big populations, their youth councils are very active because they set aside the special budget for projects, but they also involve and ensure there is inclusiveness and consultation in all government, even in the employment structures themselves. That there is no project you will implement when it has no certain percentage gazetted by the constitution for youth specifically. But you will find projects in Uganda thriving. Youths are being exploited on wages, salary wage bills, and what government is losing priority from involving them in agricultural issues where we would have leverage as a country to throwing them to investors who can use them at very low scales. Because industrialization here in Uganda is, we are surviving on investors who carry this money and return them to their foreign countries. So all this can't develop the young people. Is why I request that as youth, whether in leadership or not in leadership, we need to get vigilant and demand to have power over our own affairs.
Okay, we are moving towards the end of the show, and we have very limited time left. So we are going to look at, Ivan already started on it. We are going to look at the solution part. We are presented with post-COVID-19 challenges as young people. We are grappling with youth unemployment that we have grappled with for years. And then there are projects that government has come up with, and we have seen several challenges that the program has come up with. How do we best deal with the situation we are in right now? And I'll start with Derrick.
Thank you so much. So for me, first of all, the first step to solving the problems of the youth would be solving the issue of entrepreneurship and innovation. Makerere University has tried this on several fronts. For example, at Makerere, there is what we call the Entrepreneurship Expo. So for this, students identify problems in society. So it's from those problems that they get solutions to those problems, and then they come up with business ideas. You find students making let's say, reusable sanitary pads and other business ventures. So for me, the very first step is leveraging on those available opportunities. For example, innovations, and entrepreneurship, making sure that people can think, of problems in society and then provide solutions, and then people will come up with business ventures. I think those business ventures will in turn try to solve the unemployment problem. And then the other issue is a focus on technology, digital technology, because you realize most of the countries are shifting to, let's say, moving towards the digital era. So I think it's also very important that policymakers and all those that are interested with this mantle tap into the issue of leveraging on digital technologies to make sure that they create sustainable solutions or sustainable business formulas for the youth, because you realize also the youths, this is an area that they are really interested in. So issues like innovation, entrepreneurship, and then digital technology. And then the last issue that I would want to talk about is the education sector, because these people have really talked about it. It's also very important that we address the inequities of the education sector, because you realize the education sector that we have right now only addresses the problems that existed in the colonial
setup.
You realize that we are having people that deal with administrative issues. One time I asked myself, if you are a Ugandan student and you finish your let's say you don't get a university college degree, what can you be able to do? For example, if you don't find formal employment,
Informal sector.
do you even have any skill? Huh? If you didn't have the university degree, where would you be?
But even a degree is not a skill. So
No, I am saying if someone didn't have that if you didn't have the papers, let's say you stopped in senior 6 and you didn't go to university, would you eat? That is the issue. Would you get money to sustain yourself? Because look, if there were, let's say, if children were taught several skills, let's say like carpentry, things to do with coding, those web designing, right from a tender age, someone could reach, let's say, senior 6, and they can design, let's say, a website, and that could earn them some little money for them. Someone could be able to do carpentry, and they won't have to to rely, let's say, on only a university sort of degree for them to eat, right? So the issue is with also the education. It should be streamlined to address the challenges of today, yeah, and then leverage on digital technologies, and then innovation and entrepreneurship. Because America wouldn't have grown to that extent without Silicon Valley, right? This is where tech companies are. And this has contributed a lot, to the development of its GDP and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Derrick. Let me move to Joanitah. Your solutions to the dilemma we are in now.
Yeah. So one of the solutions I think that we should pay attention to as far as these projects are concerned is planning, because yes, the projects exist and they have been in place since the 2000 plus, but the problem is how they are being implemented and what they consider to implement these projects. For example, we talked about the problem of planning for all the youth in Uganda the same. Yet we are having different districts facing different problems. We are having a district facing a dry season from January to, and we are having we are having a district where the youth are okay with farming and they love it and they earn from it even without going to school, because maybe they were raised well or something. It may not be the help of the government. So when planning for those two categories of the youth, you can't plan for them the same way. It should be something that people should sit down, the people in the system should sit down and plan well for those two. That if I'm planning for a child from Karamoja, what does he need? Does he need to speak English? Is it what is necessary right now? Then, putting the planning aside, he talked about the education system, and I find it so vital because the education system, if these projects, somebody would know that they are to help them from primary, that this project exists and they train this person from childhood, that they know how to sew, not because they have dropped out of school. They're in school, but they still need to know how to sew. For Christ's sake, we shouldn't be spending on some things when we can do them ourselves, There's this thing that I always get into a conversation with friends about the Western countries, how the children there, the youth there, are aware from childhood. Like somebody's rich by 20, then you wonder why is that? Why is it that way? Because that means they are planned for from childhood. It's not because they are coming from better schools or better homes, but their system, their government has planned and put an education system where this child knows that by 20, I should be a responsible woman, I should be a responsible man, I'm supposed to do this. But in Uganda, you know that, let me first finish my degree.
And by the time you finish your 24,
yet you're not sure if you're even going to finish the degree. You've not included the challenges that may come your way, whether your parent might die and you don't get to finish. So in such circumstances, if you are not trained from childhood, you don't know how this all will end. So the education system is something that is so vital. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Joanitah. Let me move to Simon.
Most of the things have been mentioned and I do not want to repeat them, but I'll talk about something that is rarely discussed. The second biggest economy in the world, China, has a child control policy for a reason. One of the problems with our economy is that the biggest percentage are dependents. People that do not add anything to the country. You'll notice we are over 40 millions, but only, I think, less than 2 million pay taxes. We have a very big workforce that is even redundant. When you're too many, then when you're too many and most of you are dependents, you do not even add anything because you're not consumers, you're not a workforce, and all those sorts of things. Let us not work so much to be many. Much as we are idle, let us, because we are unemployed, we are idle, let us at least not create another section of dependence. Because if you still depend on your parent for a meal, then you have another person to depend on you as well, then we are not going to develop. Because this big population is not going to help this country at all, as much as it's not going to help you yourself. Because you can't be 24 and you have 2 dependents already. It is a problem. You're not going to have the time to develop yourself and grow. So as much as we discuss all the other things, because we have the new curriculum and almost most of the vocational work is being done and being put in the system, eventually it will come. But at what cost when we are too many for the society to handle us? Because even when you have a society that doesn't pay tax, even government then cannot work on you. The healthcare, the infrastructure, those things do not necessarily come out when you don't pay taxes, because government thrives on you, but it cannot depend on you. So we must have an honest discussion about our numbers and our family planning, really.
Okay. Yes. Actually, Ivan, you're concluding on this
Okay,
issue.
I would like to appreciate his idea, because really when he gives a case scenario of China, a country of 1.2 billion people, of how it is regulating to push its people into production, to push its people into being more productive to the country than being consumers. So it calls upon, I think, us in an African setting, it will create the very debate that we are having with these mafias of Smani, LGBT, and it will create a similar debate that how do you restrict our African values and cultures to come to that direction. But honestly, we need to look at it from a honest perspective. That first things first, if you had an education with developed with a hybrid capacitor and modeling of such a way that we would create people studying the Ugandan environment, how to succeed in such an environment. Vis-a-vis learning for 4 years about Canadian prairies, Alps, Dengoni, and such kinds, where you will even never reach the British Columbia. When will you get there? But we segregate a lot of our own affairs. That this is a country where agriculture is optional as a subject, even in the education system. But we have a lot of things that even don't belong to our environment that are compulsory. If pushing the young people themselves into commercialized agriculture, agri-tech, seeing that these people are enhanced with skills and knowledge. I know President Museveni and his colleagues, when they sit somewhere, they also discuss like us. But when you're lost from reality, it will always be hard. Reason, you will not look at it as reality to implement, but as survival. Because he is looking to how to survive with his boy in power for the next 10 years, vis-a-vis the reality that, let me perform, if I fail, I better go home. Because any leader will perform better if he knows he will be judged in the next election by going home, not by protecting himself. Whether he has performed or not, I will be there. There is where we also lose sense as a country. So we need to be honest as Ugandans, not only to the youth, but generally, even because a youth scale in Uganda, 18 to 30 years, is very short, but it is the determinant of your life. Once you misuse that time, it will take you years. Although it is never too late, but it takes you some good extra time to realign yourself. That if we align the people, it is more cheaper to align a young person still in school than to aligning the youth. If this person was aligned with skills, with a mindset, with an environment while still in school, it would be cheaper because government would only now wait to see how taxable is this person, how resourceful in terms of human resource. But now government is grappling with over 50,000 people, 9,000 jobs. Today, if an application is out of 2 positions, you'll be around 5,000. And in the 5,000, even the workers in the very institutions have kids. More than 2 kids. So you see such issues.
Yeah.
So it is a humble appeal that we get honest as Ugandans. Issues of youth cannot be reduced to only thinking around youth. They come to the whole planning of a country, whether you're planning security, you're planning health, you're planning youth. The whole scope of the country is determined by youth, and it all begins by how you plan for them from their education, because education is what you'll expect out of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We have run out of time and come to the end of our talk show. I must say I have enjoyed the talk show from the beginning. We can see that the young people have a lot to say and a lot to contribute to the development of this country. Thank you so much, Derrick, Joanitah, Simon, and Ivan, for gracing our invitation and coming through to be part of this panel. Thank you so much to Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for organizing the inter-university debate, which gives the young people at the university a platform to discuss these very important issues that affect them, especially it affects them right from when they are at the university and when they get out of the university. Thank you so much to our viewers for watching. Feel free to let us know what you think and how best the government should handle these youth-led programs and schemes. So you can put your comment in the comment section. You can go on social media and you can tag CCG and Civic Space TV. You can also hold your leaders accountable by tagging them on some of these issues. And if you are near a youth leader, you can always let your voice be progress to them so that they are able to represent our voices. From us, I say thank you. See you again next week, same time.